Good morning. Today is the 25th day of Shvat, the 4th of February. We're starting a new parsha, Parashat Mishpatim, the parsha of laws. Mishpatim literally means laws. And the entire parsha, or almost the entire parsha, except for the very last part, is dedicated to almost an assortment, a potpourri, if one would want, of various laws. Most of them have to do with laws governing social behavior, and it has to do with laws that have to do with money and with possessions and with the relationships between people when they loan money and when they loan possessions and when they rent possessions and so on. And we begin with, which is, we've talked about this many times, with a very common theme in the Torah, that we begin with the lowest state in a certain sense, the state of a Hebrew bondsman. Sometimes in earlier translations of the Torah, where I think they didn't use the right word, they called it a servant or a slave, an indentured servant, but really I think the most correct translation is a bondsman. A bondsman becomes such because he went bankrupt in some way, or he was caught stealing, and he has no way to return his fines, what he needs to pay back if he stole, or he's bankrupt and he can't pay back his debts. So this person has an option of becoming a bondsman, which means that some other Jew would take him under his patronage, and he would work for him. The maximum amount of time usually was up to 7 years until the sabbatical year, but there were options in different situations in which a person could actually stay on for 49 years until the Jubilee year. But in general, the Torah frowns upon that, and it should only be as long as is needed to pay off his debts. So that is definitely a very unwanted situation, and that's how the bondsman becomes such. And then we have the maiden, the handmaiden, who is like a bondswoman, and she ends up she's a young child. She can't be older than 12 years old, and she's given to a household to work there, again, to pay off the debts of the parents or some other situation that they have. The ideal end of that type of relationship would be that the master of the house would marry her to one of his sons, and that was considered to be the greatest type of assistance to this family. That not only was she taken care of for the amount of time that she worked for them, for the master, for the household in which she worked, she also received wages for it, which went back, in a sense, to pay back for her parents' debts. Not directly. There's a way in which is calculated, not of interest right now. And it would also lead to her marriage, which was a great act of loving kindness towards her and her family, that she could marry into a well-to-do family. So these are definitely situations that are negative, and yet, like we said, the Torah, in a sense, always starts with the chaotic situation, then moves on to something more rectified. But what we want to talk about now, after having talked about this, is we want to talk about this whole concept of being a bondsman, which, again, if you look at the older translations, they would have translated this either as a Hebrew slave or a Hebrew servant. And these words today, even servant today, I don't know if any of you remember the English series called Downstairs, Upstairs, or Upstairs, Downstairs, whatever they called it now. They now have, from what I see, another similar type of series going on called Downton Abbey. And you see the whole life of servants serving the nobility. That's how we think today of servitude. And it's the same problem as with monarchy, as we'll see in a moment. And these are frowned upon in the Western world, both servitude and monarchy. And it's actually a problem. So let's get straight into it and say that being able to feel servitude in the right way is actually one of the cornerstones of a healthy psychology. Of course, again, it has to be done in the right way and under the right type of, we'll call it a master right now, and see what that means. So the first of the 10 Commandments tells us that God took us out of Egypt, out of a house of servitude or bondage. The sages say that we learn from this that the Jewish people are God's servants and should not serve anyone who himself is a servant. Just as we should fear no one but God, we should serve only God. Now, work, or the Hebrew word for servant or serving is the same word as work in English, avodah. And work deteriorated, meaning serving, when we say serving God. So work, which is the corollary of serving people or working for people, deteriorated from Adam to Cain. But then it deteriorated even more until it reached Canaan, who became a slave to his brothers, as Noah said. When it reached Canaan, work had fallen to the lowest level possible and had become the basis of slavery, meaning that something went wrong with the whole concept of what it means to work for someone, what it means to serve someone. So work is connected with service, like the service and rituals done in the temple. But ritual alone does not capture the full meaning of work. I can be a freelancer who gets hired to do work for some contractor. A servant, though, can only do the work of his master. You can say, "What's your work?" And I could answer, "I'm an electrician," but that does not mean that you belong to the person who contracted you to work as an electrician. But in Hebrew, the work is to be in servitude, to belong to someone, to a master. In the case of our connection with God, every Jew is like a servant that belongs to the master of the universe. There are different levels of ownership that you can experience. Now this has to do with the levels of consciousness that the person has. If the consciousness is what we call in the world of creation, so every Jew there is like a Hebrew maidservant. No, there's a whole reason for this. We're not going to get into this whole parallel, but just to say this, that the maidservant is the consciousness of the world of creation. The world of formation is the consciousness of a Hebrew servant or a bondsman. And in the world of action, you do go to completely belonging, so to speak, to God. And we're talking here about a Jewish consciousness which is likened to being a non-Jewish slave, or what's called a Canaanite slave. At that state, the person feels that they are 100% dedicated and belong to God. So to work and serve in Hebrew means to belong, to be the possession of someone. Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of the land of Israel, used to sign his letters, "A servant to a holy people, Eved le'am kadosh." He would declare, "I am nothing more than a servant." Today, it is difficult to talk about servitude as something positive, as a category of psychological work. It goes against the entire Western mentality to say that you are someone's servant. Or someone or something, as we'll see. Western civilization today is fighting against a mentality associated with servitude. Everyone is encouraged to feel free. This battle is actually, at its heart, a battle against the Torah sentiment. Sometimes you fight against something and it's a good thing, because there are negative aspects that need to be purged from that thing. So there is something positive about the Western drive to personal freedom. But you have to be careful, because there are aspects of servitude, like we said, that deteriorated from Adam to Cain, from Cain to Canaan, that need to be purged. But you have to be careful to not completely abnegate the whole concept, because you may end up pouring out the baby with the dirty bathwater. The same can be said, for instance, in the fight against monarchy in the world. Why did people abolish monarchy? Basically because they were against what they thought was the problems in monarchy. Most importantly, the corruption. But seeking to completely nullify the sovereignty of monarchs is on a certain level very good, because then you get rid of all the corruption, supposedly. But, first of all, corruption, turned out, can creep back into democracies just as much. But if you destroy monarchy, the concept of kingdom altogether, meaning there's no concept of kingdom, of what we call in Hebrew malchus, the kingdom. If there are no kings at all, then you have also negated the concept of David, the king of Israel, is alive and exists. David Melch Yisrael Chai V'Kayim. So you take away that too. And that should not be your goal. So you have to be careful what you purge and what you keep. The same goes for servitude. Servitude corresponds to the type of psychological work associated, obviously, with the sphere of kingdom. This is actually from a class that Rabbi Ginsburg gave about 10 different, or actually there were 11 there, 11 different basic types of psychological work that people need to engage in order to reach a healthy state of mind. Monarchy and servitude are mutually dependent, as in truth it is a king who has servants. But if you throw out servitude, then you also harm the family. Now this is where we begin to see how servitude is needed, because healthy family life demands that both the husband and wife feel that they are servants, not of each other, but that they belong to their bond. The bond is what they are servants to. This is the whole point behind the ketubah, the marriage contract. Both become servants, but not to each other, as we said. That's the external side of it. The inner side of it, the interior, is that marriage is not just a commitment to one another. It is a commitment to our common bond, a commitment to serving that bond and the family it begets. You both belong to something higher. Just as Rav Kook said about himself, a servant to a holy people. He belongs to the Jewish people, they are his master, and he is their servant. This is also how we can understand that Hebrew servant or Hebrew bondsman, Eved Ivri, has the same value as Mashiach. The Mashiach is the ultimate person, or the person who has the ultimate sense of being a servant to his cause. So, we said earlier that with Canaan, work or slavery reached an absolute low. About Canaan, Noah said, "Cursed is Canaan, the slave of slaves, he shall be to his brothers." Who was the first to rectify the concept of slavery? The sages say that Eliezer did this. Eliezer was Abraham's servant, and he was the first one to describe himself saying, "I am Abraham's servant." He didn't take the service, the slavery side of it, as just being without will, without his own freedom, but rather he said, "I am committed to something higher than myself," to Abraham. The sages tell us that Eliezer was Canaan himself, and by identifying himself as Abraham's servant, by recognizing the image of a holy master in Abraham, he rectified the whole concept of slavery and turned it into what we can call rectified servitude. Doing so lifted the curse Noah had placed on him and made him blessed. For Eliezer to be Abraham's slave, his servant, was the greatest possible joy. The two, joy and lowliness, are interdependent. They depend on one another. So first of all, that's very important to know about Noah's curse. A lot of people in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s were quoting as part of what they called the white burden, or something like that. And they were basing their ideas that somehow the descendants of Canaan, who were apparently the people living in Africa, were somehow supposed to be slaves because it was their destiny given to them by Noah. But it's important to know that with Canaan, this whole curse actually ended. Canaan was Eliezer, Abraham's service. So Abraham's servant. So we have a lot more to discuss here. I hope that this week we'll be able to get the wonders out in time. And this will go up on the Patreon in a couple of minutes. And there might even be another section that we haven't talked about at all, about how to foster this type of feeling inside that I am in service of a higher cause of God, in marriage, of the marriage bond, everything else. And I hope that I can see you tomorrow again in better health. And we'll continue with this week's Parsha, which is a fascinating Parsha. You'll see that every single one of these portions, every single one of these readings is interpreted in the Torah's inner dimension in phenomenal ways. and I'm looking forward to it. Hope to see you. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.